I'm telling the behind-the-scenes stories of my television and film career. However, let me just say, even though I'm using the word television, it really is content, producing content of all sorts. It doesn't matter where you see it. It could be on television, it could be on the big screen, it could be on your small screen on your phone. I am a television producer, a producer of content, and so I'm just sharing some of the behind-the-scenes stories throughout my career. They're still in the works as well. There are stories still being created. However, this is mostly the stories from back in the early days. And in my last video, I shared how I knew that I could do production and was interested in television production, and it was from the productions that I was able to put together through my sorority, Alpha Gamma Delta, at the University of Kentucky, and specifically going after Greek Sing, by which we did, and putting together costumes and the music and the choreography for those productions. Now, again, just to touch on a few of the highlights, with one of those productions being the cartoon production, I actually helped to build and create some of the costumes that were some of the bigger costumes. My mom and I figured out how to make the costumes that are big, like mascot costumes, and she had actually worked with one of the mascot creators on how they had created the structure for the big the headpiece and for the whole costume. And then so we went and tackled creating a Pink Panther that had the big head with all of the material and the specific outline of the face and the exact duplicate of what you would see the Pink Panther as being in the cartoon. And then we also created the Scooby-Doo costume as well. That was a cute costume. And we figured out how to make Fred and Barney Flintstone. And those were very unique costumes as well, very different in the way they had to be designed. And between my mom and me, we made those costumes. And then, of course, all the girls in the productions, they made their own costumes, and we helped as needed with some of the actual creation of those costumes. But the girls did a fabulous job of each having a costume that fit into that production. So it made the appearance. You had 100+ girls on a stage, all dressed in cartoon costumes, Bugs Bunny and Roadrunner, etc. It was really a fun production. The next year, the production was a commercial production, and we designed costumes with all of those as well. And again, all the girls created the costume. We just had, sort of supervised and helped with materials and construction, etc. And then the choreography for both of those was very important. Now, I put together the music with my piano teacher. Yes, I play the piano, and I know I haven't mentioned that yet, but yes, I had a piano teacher that was excellent in putting together material. She happened to have been a former Alpha Gam as well, so she helped to pull the music together and to bridge from one song to another to make a medley. And so that combination of all those things, we were able to really pop out and win #1 with those two productions, and do a production that had not yet been seen in what was called Greek Sing before. We sort of changed the game with that. So let me catapult back. Remember that led up to me knowing that I wanted a job with PM Magazine. I had that job for a number of years, about about a year and a half to 2 years. The show was canceled. Started being canceled nationally, not because it was not successful, well, because it was so successful that the owner of the license, which was Westinghouse, they started increasing the prices by doubling all of the licensing fees and taking away some of the airtime by which we would earn revenues for the show. So all the stations started canceling those shows across the nation. So at that time, I was evaluating where to move next, and I got a show television show offer at one of the production companies, actually, to just oversee all of their creative services, which would be commercials, it would be writing shows, producing a film for TV, and just anything that was creative that would come through the production company. So I did jump out and take that job, and that was loads of fun. As I had taken that job, though, I got a call from the news director back at Channel 27, Ken Kurtz. He had made a way for me to have an anchor position in the morning. I had told the news department that I would consider taking an anchor position or a reporter position to, as my next step as a job. And that was not available at the time when the other job was offered to me. So I went ahead and took the job. The production company was Showcase Productions. And so Ken called me and offered me the job for the morning anchor job. And I had to decline because I told him that I'd already just accepted a job. I needed to follow through with what I had accepted, and I appreciated him making room for that offer. However, at this time I had to, pass. So in the job as Creative Services Director at the production company, I worked with ad agencies to refine their scripts, to improve the concept, and in some cases I actually served as the writer of the commercials and concepts. And so there was one particular client that came to us, and he was the owner of a gun shop. And in talking with him about what he wanted in his commercials, his answer to me was, "I want to win an award for my commercial." Well, that's a tall order, because you don't just write spots and automatically get awards. But the reason why he said he wanted to win an award was his friend had just won an award for his spot, and he wanted to be able to do that as well for his company. So I heard his plea, and I said we would do the best job we could. And so I wrote 3 to 4 spots for him to be able to choose one of those spots. They were all different, and he chose 3 to go ahead and produce all of those 3. One was a spot between a father and a son. The second one was a remake of an old Western saloon location, and the third was a little bit more of just a direct spot that still put his shop and company in a really strong positive light, but it was a little bit more of a direct kind of spot. So the spot that he liked the best when we produced them all was the one that embraced a father and a son at that coming of age moment. They were going out early in the morning where there's fog that's rising across the grass, and he's demonstrating to his son what you do when they're getting ready to go out for their first time together out on a hunting expedition, whatever that would be. We didn't know exactly what moment that was as far as what they would be, whether it's ducks or deer. We didn't know that. That wasn't part of the spot. But it was that moment where the father is showing the son the safety of a gun, and they were just having that moment. They weren't dressed as hunters. They were dressed as a father and a son, just going out into the morning to take that special time by themselves. And the father was nurturing the son. And that spot, after it was produced, that spot did win an award. And so we were able to let the owner of the gun shop actually achieve what he wanted to achieve, as well as having a great spot that he was able to air on air, and all three spots he was able to air as well. Now, I produced shows there as well. I worked with Arnold Schwarzenegger on one of the shows. We were producing a show for USA Network, and it was a bodybuilding show that was around Mr. Kentucky bodybuilder, and it was called Mr. Kentucky. And Arnold had come into town, and so I asked him to host our show and to also, have interview segments, etc. So he agreed, and during the actual location where the bodybuilders are all preparing for the show that's coming up, and again, it was mainly a competition that we made into a show. I met him at the side door to walk him into the location where we're shooting the interviews. And one of the interesting moments that I had with Arnold was that as he's walking, all the bodybuilders are stopping and turning and noticing that it's Arnold. And so with all eyes being on him, I asked, does this bother you? As I'm looking around and noticing everybody has stopped what they're doing. And his answer was, no, it doesn't bother me at all, because if I can be a mentor to them, like I've had mentors in my life, then I would prefer that I could do that for people. And so I'm hoping that that's what, I can be for them, as a mentor. And I thought that was a really good answer that I did not expect for him to say. And so then we went on in and we had the interviews, and it was funny because, we had our monitor set up and all of our production gear just ready for him to come in and sit down, and the lights, we turned on the lights, and he briefly asked for us to turn the monitor around. And when we did, he looked at himself and he, adjusted, which he really didn't need to adjust, but he was just, making sure everything was okay. And then we turned the monitor around, and that's the first time that's ever happened for me to have anyone want to look at the monitor. But that was Arnold's way of making sure and checking that everything was looking good, from his side. So after that production, Arnold did personally, he was doing a lot of autographs for people. I don't ask for autographs. It's not something that you typically do in the business when you're working with a celebrity. But he took one of the name tags that I had, and he actually went ahead and signed the back, himself, and gave it to me, which I thought was a nice gesture. And I had to get approvals for the releases, etc., from him. So he gave me his personal phone number for me to call when he got back to California, and to get those approvals and to get through with that. So I was having to follow up with those things as well. Another production that we did at Showcase Productions was a Christmas story. I came up with a storyline for a Christmas story, and we hired a screenwriter to write that story up. It was a Christmas story, so I had not actually realized that if a screenwriter is not a Christian, that they wouldn't necessarily know the nuances of what you would put into the part about Christmas as being a Christian holiday. So I had to rewrite portions of the script just to bring in the purpose and the meaning of Christmas. And the film was called Spirit of Christmas, that aired, and when it aired, we aired it in Lexington on Channel 27. It aired in prime time, and they outsold their airtime at very high peak rates, and it was highly successful. And I had gotten approvals from other stations to air it on their stations in other markets as well. And then they requested for us to do another one the following year, because they had just gotten a lot of positive responses on that. And at some time I may elaborate a little bit more on that production, but that was really an interesting event that occurred. Now, shortly after that, I mean, there were a lot more productions of commercials and working, like I said, with ad agencies. Oh, another one that I do want to share is about a bodybuilding, well, not the bodybuilding show, it's about a wrestling show. Randy Savage came to our production company and he wanted to create his own wrestling show. And he was working with one of our producers, which was one of the owners of the company as well. And of course I was producing the show with them. We were doing the pilot, and it was interesting because he wanted me to host that show. I was walking by the office as they were talking, and I hear, you know, Wayne, which was one of the owners, wave me in, say, "Come on in here, Vicki, I want to ask you a question." And I thought, oh no, here it comes. I can just see the look on their faces that they're going to ask something that they know they're not sure that I'm going to answer yes to. And they said, "We want you to anchor the wrestling show." And I said, "Oh, no, 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 you don't." I could just see them putting me in shorts and having me hold up signs walking around the wrestling ring, and that's what they were wanting me to do for the wrestling show. And they said, "Oh, no, 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 we're not planning on that. We'd put you in an evening gown, and then you would open up the show." And I actually passed on that. I told them that I would rather just stay producing the show, and let's find somebody else to host the show. And I didn't even feel like it needed to be a woman. I felt like we needed to have a man host the show. So I continued to produce it, and I wrote all the segments, and we had interviews with Kabuki and you know, all the list of characters. And the funniest story that I had, now I had heard a little bit of the rumblings that some of this stuff might be made up, but I still thought we were dealing with real characters, that we could talk about the real people behind the characters. Well, in my interview with Kabuki, it was the first time I actually heard the whole truth about what the wrestling shows were about. So I'm asking Kabuki the very first question. I'm saying, "Okay, Kabuki, where are you from?" And he puts his hand up over the camera, and he leans over. He goes, "Where do you want me to be from?" And I said, "Well, where are you really from?" Well, he says, "I can't really tell you where I'm from because I'm going to be 2 or 3 characters in the wrestling thing. So I have to make up who I am." I go, okay. We got to rethink this whole thing, because I had written the show where we're actually talking about the real people behind the characters. So we were going to have to think a whole nother way to approach this. I ended up working out each of them having a history with their characters so that they could then interview in character who they were, and that was just such an eye-opening experience for me. Wrestling shows were huge at that time. We were going to wrestling shows and watching. Of course, they are still huge now. Randy Savage and his father and his brother, Leaping Lenny, all decided to go ahead and jump back into the bigger format for the wrestling shows instead of launching their own. So we only did those initial shows, the pilot and a few others, and they went on with their career. And of course they became bigger and bigger even in later years after that. So those are a few of the fun stories. Now that company lasted for about 2 to 2.5 years of me working with them, and then they closed down because of some of the operations that they were needing to get into and just didn't grow into that arena. I had worked with one of the people that had been the agent for Peter Frampton and for Weird Al, and discovered a couple other artists. He was from New York, and he had come to Lexington to be closer to his son for a period of several years. He had come to work at the company, so he went ahead and moved out to LA when his name was Paul Smith, when he left Lexington. And I then started looking for what my next opportunity would be, And my next opportunity, I had two different choices. In my next video, I'll share about which choice I made and what my two options were. But one would have taken me to New York. The other one would have taken me to Texas, specifically to the Fort Worth, Dallas market. So those are my two choices of my next jump from Lexington. And I'm enjoying sharing some of these stories with you because it's been a long time since I've even thought about them. But all of these are stair steps in what continues, you know, to be built and put in place as the years go by and you do more and more productions. You just end up adding up a lot of stories and good times that you see people in their early years and can watch them as they proceed and progress in other productions. So I'll catch you on the next video.